Do you want to read a book that has been referred to as anti-novel and obsolescent? Okay, I'll give you a minute to look up obsolescent. Well, if you still are interested, you should read Tristram Shandy by Laurence Sterne. I read this book, and before we get to the review, I'm going to answer two questions. Did I enjoy reading this book? And the answer is yes, kinda. And second question is, do I ever want to reread Tristram Shandy? And the answer is no. Welcome to Whiskey and Literature, where we read and discuss the greatest books of all time, the best stories that have ever been put to paper, and occasionally the worst books and all those in between. And while we're turning those pages, we're sipping those bottles, those finely distilled spirits. I'm your host, Captain Mike. Thanks for being with me. Last year, I watched a video on the 50 greatest books of all time and decided to read all of them in 2023. And I added 2 books for good measure to get to 52 books in 52 weeks. And decided to create this YouTube channel to share my experiences and reviews with you. This is my 5th review, Tristram Shandy by Laurence Sterne. And speaking of Laurence Sterne, let's get to him before we get to the book. He's Anglo-Irish, was born in 1713, died in 1768, and he was ordained an Anglican priest in 1738. He wrote a religious satire in 1759, and it did so well that he decided to write full-time until he passed away in 1968. He wrote furiously, and Tristram Shandy was dripped out in 7 different volumes until it was combined later into the book we know today. I think authors back in the day released their books this way in a serial format to keep their readers' interest and also to generate more income, kind of like a streaming service today might release a television show over a period of weeks instead of just a big dump. And before moving to the book, I want to answer a quirky question for the author, Laurence Sterne. Would I like to sit down with him and a nice pour of whiskey and talk about and make fun of religion, politics, and life in general? And anyone who could write this hoot of a book, I think would be a great conversation. So yes, I would love to sit down with Laurence Sterne. Tristram Shandy was originally published in 9 volumes starting in 1759. Laurence Sterne passed away in 1768, which was right towards when the last volume was released. And so he might have been ill towards the end, which is why I felt like the book ended fairly abruptly. This book is full of double entendres, visual devices, and the narrator, Tristram Shandy, cannot tell a story in a straight line. Digression is the name of the game. Don Quixote was a major influence on Laurence Sterne. Some of the main characters from that novel are mentioned in Tristram Shandy, and even Cervantes himself was mentioned by name. Sterne was an avid reader of the works of his day, and he took some of their whole passages, essentially cutting and pasting from these works in mockery and appreciation to make his own work. This in fact reminds me of another slightly more modern work where the author took, again, whole passages from another book, pasted it into his own book, and called it his own. And if you know, you know. Having read both Midnight's Children and Tristram Shandy, I am certain that Salman Rushdie was familiar with this work because in both of those books, absolutely nothing happens, and noses, for some reason, are a super important part of the story. Many critics of the day did not care for this book, but London society appreciated the bawdy humor of the novel. And speaking of bawdy, let's get to the whiskey of the week. This week we have Penelope Toasted. This beautiful bottle came from a local liquor store. It's available, it says, in the large big box stores, but I've never ever seen it there. I've only ever seen Penelope at my local liquor stores. It is worth the hunt. It's very distinctive looking. I think it's a great bottle, which is what attracted me to it at the beginning. Large P on all the Penelope bottles, usually with this etched or painted glass. The flowers looks really nice. Some of the other bottles do have labels on them, but this is a very distinctive, great looking bottle. This is the Toasted series. It's barrel strength. This one comes in at 114 proof, which is pretty legit. They have different series, and each one of the batches has its own mash bill. This one is 22.01 or 22-01. This says the toast is heavy and the char is 3. It's a great looking liquid. It's beautiful. I've had a couple small pours out of here. It's very nice on the nose. There's quite a bit of rye, you can tell that. I don't think I've ever had a toasted whiskey. And this is the only Penelope that I have had. That proof definitely shines through. The taste is great. Definitely a bit different tasting. I don't think, like I said, I've ever had a toasted whiskey. But I do like and I do recommend. Okay guys, if you enjoy the content, like the video. It's free. And if you want to see more of my content, subscribe to the videos. It really does help the channel. So now let's talk about what happens in the book. And that's pretty short because nothing happens. It's called The Life and Opinions of Tristram Shandy. But it should be called A Couple Things Happened to Tristram Shandy and the Opinions of Tristram's Father and his Uncle. So we do hear how his parents met, and there is some backstory here and there to flesh out some of the characters, but mainly it's just postulating and opining and about everything and anything. So 4 things do actually happen to Tristram in the book, and they are all bad. First of all, as his parents were conceiving him, they were doing the deed right as his father was about to. His mother asked him, "Dear, did you remember to wind the clock?" And this disruption of this magic mojo of the moment disrupted the humors that would have led to a favored future for this child. Second, Tristram's father was of the belief that a large nose, Midnight's Children anyone, portended a great future for a man's life, but the doctor crushed Tristram's nose with some forceps as he was extracting him during the birth. Third, his father wanted him to be named Trismegistus, but this was misunderstood when the serving girl ran and relayed the message, and instead he was given the name Tristram, which according to Tristram's father is the worst, most unlucky name possible to be given to a child. And lastly, he had an accidental circumcision when, as a toddler, he was hanging his junk, his manhood, out of the window, and the window was closed on him and causing him to have a circumcision. Other than that, it's almost exclusively conversing and opining between Walter, Tristram's father, and his uncle, Toby, and a couple of the other characters in the book. The narrator is Tristram Shandy, and he also shares his opinions and his thoughts as he weaves his meandering tale throughout the book. Politics, war, religion, sieges, which side of the woman is best, the front or the back, it all just rises to the level of absurdity. Graphic devices were used throughout the book. Blank pages, black pages, marbled pages, squiggly lines. At one point, Uncle Toby has fallen in love with the widow Wadman, and Tristram begins to describe her and decides to give you, the reader, a blank page to draw her. I'm going to read to you from page 325, and I do have to put the glasses on. So this is my page 325, chapter 38. To conceive this right, call for a pen and ink. Here is paper ready to your hand. Sit down, sir. Paint her to your own mind, as like your mistress as you can, as unlike your wife as your conscience will let you. 'Tis all one to me. Please, but your own fancy in it. So he gives you a blank page in here to draw to your imagination, The Widow Wadman. In summary, this book was utterly ridiculous. I found myself laughing out loud sometimes because I could not believe I was listening to or reading such utter nonsense. It reminded me of Mr. Toad's Wild Ride in Disney World. It never went in a straight line. You never knew what was coming around the corner. You felt like you were being jerked back and forth, and it was crazy. I didn't feel like the graphic devices in the book blew me away. I know that's a big part of the book that everyone talks about. I found them interesting, maybe a little novelty, but that was about it. I did listen to the book mostly on Audible. I read quite a bit, but I listened mostly to it. And the narrator did a fantastic job of bringing the book alive to me. I appreciated his reading and everything he did. And if you were going to experience Tristram Shandy, I would suggest you download it from Audible and burn through it that way. I'm glad to have experienced Tristram Shandy, but I will not be returning to or rereading this book in my lifetime. A few years ago, Mrs. Captain and I, we went to Rome, and we did everything there. I think we were there for 4 nights, and we did all the sights and the sounds, and it was a great, amazing experience. But I never, ever need to return to Rome. And in that same vein, I never, ever need to return to Tristram Shandy. There's just too many other books to read out there to come back to this volume. One last thing before we finish up today. Next review coming up is David Copperfield. I'm already about halfway through this book, and it has been a fun, sad read. I am really enjoying it. Review coming up. For now, my friends, turn those pages and stay thirsty.